I'm Thelma Wade, 26 years old, and last week, my world turned upside down at a family dinner. My whole life, I've been the invisible one, the one my parents barely noticed next to my sister, the dazzling influencer who could do no wrong. They always praised her, showered her with everything, while I was just there. But that night, they pushed me too far. It was Saturday, and we were gathered around the dining table, the usual tension simmering. My mom, Sarah, smiled, her voice syrupy sweet, and said, "Sweetie, your sister needs your room for her live stream studio. It's time to give it up." I froze, fork in hand, my childhood sanctuary, my one safe space slipping away. Before I could respond, my dad, Robert, slammed his hand on the table. His face red, he roared, "Agree or get out of this house." The room went dead silent. My sister, Tanya, smirked, leaning back like she'd already won. My younger brother, Ethan, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I could have argued. I could have shouted back, listed every time they overlooked me, every moment they chose her over me. But instead, I smiled a slow, deliberate smile that made my mom's eyes narrow and my dad's jaw tighten. They didn't know what was coming. They thought they could push me around like always, but I had something up my sleeve, something that would flip their world upside down. And it was only a matter of time before they found out. If it were you in that situation, what would you do? Stay silent, fight back, or smile like I did? Comment your answer below. I want to know which path you would choose. When I was 13, I started working weekends at a local grocery store, bagging groceries for a few bucks an hour. I saved every penny, stashing it in a tin box under my bed, hoping to buy a computer to learn more about finance. By 15, I had nearly 500 pounds, hard-earned, every cent mine. One day, Tanya came home raving about a talent show that required a fancy video entry. The entry fee was steep, and she needed a new camera to stand out. Without a word to me, Mom and Dad raided my tin box. They took every dollar I'd saved to buy Tanya a sleek camcorder, complete with a tripod. "It's for your sister's future," Dad said, not even looking at me. Tanya beamed, already filming herself twirling in the living room while I stood there, my chest tight, my dreams gutted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went back to my room, shut the door, and opened another book. That moment lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to beg for their approval or compete for their attention. I'd prove myself in my own way, on my own terms. Every time they praised Tanya's latest performance or handed Ethan another toy, I buried myself deeper in my studies. Maths became my escape, numbers, my rebellion. I aced every test, stayed late at the library, and taught myself things my teachers couldn't. My room was my fortress, where I built my plans to rise above their expectations. Tanya kept chasing the spotlight. She'd drag Mom and Dad to every talent show, every school play, soaking up their cheers. Ethan, still little, would tag along, his pockets stuffed with sweets they'd bought to keep him happy. I'd watch from the sidelines, my nose in a book, ignored. Once at a family barbecue, a neighbor asked what I wanted to be when I grew up. Before I could answer, Mom laughed and said, "Oh, she's just into her boring numbers." Tanya snickered, tossing her hair while Dad changed the subject to her latest audition. I bit my lip and walked away, vowing to show them one day. My room held my secrets. Notebooks filled with investment ideas, library books on finance, and a quiet determination that grew stronger every time they overlooked me. I wasn't flashy like Tanya or coddled like Ethan, but I had something they didn't: focus. I knew I'd find a way out of their shadow, not by leaving the house, but by building something they couldn't ignore. And I'd do it right here in Richmond, in the room they thought meant nothing. After college, I didn't stop. I saw a gap in Richmond. People needed personal finance advice, not just corporate banking. So, I started my own consulting business right from my childhood bedroom. I built a website on a secondhand laptop, using every trick I'd learned to make it look professional. My first clients were neighbors, small business owners, and retirees who wanted to stretch their savings. I'd meet them at coffee shops, breaking down complex investment plans into steps they could follow. Word spread, and soon I had a steady stream of clients, from teachers to shopkeepers, all trusting me to grow their money. Within 3 years, my business was pulling in millions in revenue. I'd crafted a brand that stood for trust and results, helping hundreds of clients build wealth. But you'd never know it looking at me. I wore the same simple clothes, drove a used car, and kept living in my parents' house, in that same room with my old desk and shelves of books. I didn't need to flash my success. I knew what I'd built. My bank account grew, but I saved every dollar, planning for something bigger, something my family couldn't imagine. They never asked about my work. To them, I was still the quiet kid who'd never amount to much. At dinner, Tanya would ramble about her latest streaming gig, her followers climbing into the thousands. My dad would nod proudly while my mom gushed over Ethan's high school antics, calling him our little star. If I mentioned my job, they'd change the subject or give me that look like I was an embarrassment. "You still doing that number stuff?" Dad once asked, barely hiding his smirk. I'd just nod, keeping my victories to myself. There were moments I doubted myself. One night, after Tanya bragged about a brand deal and my mom clapped like she'd won an Oscar, I felt small. I sat in my room, staring at my client files, wondering if I'd ever be seen. That's when Phyllis Coleman, my friend from college, stepped in. We'd met in an economics class, bonding over our love for numbers. She came over, saw the weight on my shoulders, and said, "You're doing something real, Thelma. They don't get it, but you're changing lives." Her words pulled me back, reminding me why I'd started. It was the only time I needed that kind of support, and Phyllis was there, no questions asked. I kept going, signing bigger clients, local doctors, small tech startups while staying under the radar. My parents thought I was scraping by, maybe working some dead-end office job. They didn't know I'd paid off my student loans, saved a fortune, and was already planning my next move. My room, with its creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper, was my headquarters, my proof that I didn't need their approval to succeed. I was ready for whatever came next, even if they weren't. It started the day after that disastrous dinner. I'd spent years saving, my bank account swollen from my consulting business, but I kept it quiet, living simply in my parents' house. Their demand to give up my room, my sanctuary, lit a spark. I wasn't going to just leave. I was going to make a statement. I called Eleanor Fisher, the real estate agent I'd been working with for months, scouting properties in secret. "Eleanor," I said, "I want that house across the street. Let's close it now." She didn't hesitate. "It's yours," she replied, her voice crackling with excitement over the phone. By Friday, the paperwork was done, the payment wired, and I held the deed to a house that screamed everything my family never believed I could achieve. I invited them over that Sunday, not to my new place, but to our usual family coffee at their house. They thought it was just another chance to pressure me about the room. My mom greeted me with that same fake smile, saying, "Have you thought about what we discussed?" My dad grunted, already impatient. Tanya lounged on the couch, scrolling her phone while Ethan sat quietly, his eyes flicking to me like he sensed something was coming. I took a sip of coffee, set the mug down, and said, "I've made my decision. I'm moving out. Into the house across the street." Their jaws dropped. Mom's smile vanished, replaced by a confused blink. Dad's coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth. Tanya's phone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a thud. Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed like he was trying to process it. "What do you mean across the street?" Dad finally barked, his voice sharp with disbelief. I pulled out the deed, sliding it across the table. "I bought it paid in full. Cash." Before they could recover, I kept going. "Oh, and that boring finance job you all mocked? It's not a job. It's my company. I've been running a personal finance consulting business for years. It's worth millions." The room went silent. The kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Mom's eyes widened, darting to the deed like it was a trick. Dad's face turned red, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Tanya, for once, was speechless, her usual smirk gone. Ethan just stared, his expression shifting from shock to something softer, like realization. Eleanor called right then, as if on cue. I put her on speaker. "Congratulations, Thelma," she said, her voice bright. "The house is officially yours." That was one of the fastest cash deals I've ever seen. I thanked her, hung up, and let the words sink in. My family's disbelief was palpable. Mom was the first to break. How did you afford this?" she stammered, her voice a mix of awe and suspicion. Dad jumped in, leaning forward. "Where is this money coming from? You've been living here, barely scraping by." Tanya, recovering her edge, scoffed. "Millions? Yeah, right. You're making this up." But her voice trembled, betraying her doubt. I didn't flinch. Believe what you want, I said, my tone calm but firm. I built a business helping people manage their wealth. I've got clients across Richmond, doctors, business owners, retirees. I didn't need to flaunt it. I stood up, picking up the deed. I'm moving out, but I'm not going far. You'll see me every day, right across the street. That's when they started scrambling. Mom's tone shifted suddenly. Sweetie, honey, we didn't mean to push you out. Let's talk about this. Maybe we can work something out. Dad nodded, his gruffness gone. Yeah, you don't need to leave. We're family. Tanya, ever the opportunist, chimed in. So how much are you making? Maybe I could use some of that for my channel. Her eyes gleamed, already calculating. Ethan stayed quiet, but I caught him looking at me differently, like he was seeing me for the first time. There was a flicker of guilt in his eyes, like he was starting to question the way they'd always treated me. I shook my head, stepping back. This isn't about you, I told them. I'm done being invisible. I'm moving into my house, and I'm not here to bankroll anyone. Mom's face fell. Dad's jaw tightened. Tanya's eyes narrowed like she was already plotting. Ethan, though, gave a small nod like he understood. I walked out, leaving them in their stunned silence, and crossed the street to my new home. Boxes were already packing me books, my desk, my life, ready to leave their house behind. As the weeks passed, I watched my family unravel from afar. Tanya took a job at a local mall, her streaming days over, her confidence replaced by a quiet resignation. Mom and Dad adjusted to their new life, their voices tinged with bitterness when they mentioned me. They'd stop by, sometimes standing awkwardly on my porch, asking vague questions about my business. You're doing so well, Mom would say, her smile forced. Dad would nod, adding, we're proud of you. But the words felt like an afterthought. I'd thank them, keep the conversation short, and send them on their way. They didn't get to rewrite the past just because I'd succeeded. Ethan was the only one who seemed to change for real. He'd text me updates about his classes, small victories like passing a maths exam or landing a part-time job. I'm trying to be better, he wrote once. And I believed him. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And that was more than I could say for the others. I'd reply with encouragement, keeping the door open, but not wide enough for them to walk back into my life without earning it. From my porch, I'd look at their old house, now occupied by a new family, and feel a strange mix of peace and resolve. I'd proven myself, not just to them, but to me. Their downfall wasn't my fault, but it was a consequence of their choices. And I wasn't done building my future. I've built a life in Richmond that's mine, free from the shadows of my family's expectations. I made a choice to help Ethan, wiring money for his college tuition after he showed real effort to change. He texts me updates, grateful, and I'm glad to see him grow. But I've drawn a firm line with Tanya, my dad, and my mom. Their calls go unanswered now. Their attempts to reconnect ignored. I'm not here to fix their mistakes or fuel their regrets. They chose to overlook me for years, and I've chosen to move forward without them. Last weekend, I invited Phyllis and a group of friends to my new home for a celebration. The living room buzzed with chatter, the kitchen filled with the smell of homemade food and laughter. Phyllis, always the life of the party, raised a glass and toasted to my journey. To Thelma, who built this from nothing, she cheered, and my friends clapped their support, a stark contrast to the family I'd left behind. We danced, shared stories, and planned for the future. My house, no longer just a building, but a symbol of my independence. Looking back, I've learned that self-reliance is my greatest strength. My family's favoritism toward Tanya led to their financial ruin and social fallout, a harsh lesson in the cost of bias. I realized my worth doesn't depend on their approval. It comes from the work I've done, the lives I've changed, and the home I've built. You don't need a family's validation to shine. You need your own resolve. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, I hope this inspires you to keep pushing forward. Share your own experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've overcome being ignored. Your story matters, just like mine.